All right, welcome to the AI Revolution podcast. We're super excited to have Bryce Judy on with us today. He is young and thriving and is going to change the world with AI. We're super excited to hear about what he's doing with his tool called Pendien. Thanks for coming on the show, Bryce. How you doing?
Doing so good. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk to you guys.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited to have you on the show. Can you give us and our listeners a quick intro of you?
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned I'm young. I'm very young. I'm a junior in college right now, studying information systems. And kind of how my interest in all this stuff happened as I was going, learning in the business school, started getting interested, seeing these tools pop up, and pretty interesting seeing how professors were reacting to it, seeing how we could use the tools to streamline our workflows. And then as I started getting better at coding, started realizing the implementation of these things. So yeah, I don't know. I'm super excited to kind of share how that happened.
Yeah, so what
Awesome.
was kind of like what led you to investigate language models as like a tool deeper than just, hey, like I can use this to help me with my homework?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was working on just a little side project, and I was trying to do natural language processing to process pretty much resumes and then match them to job descriptions and find like the best candidate matchers. But I was having a very hard time getting something that would catch the nuances of language. And so that's what LLMs are super good at, just catching the intricacies of the English language and then kind of pulling out the key parts and parsing it to a data structure where I could actually use it. So that was kind of like my intro into AI, was that project.
Yeah, it's almost spooky how good language models are now, because we've had like a lot of like natural language processing stuff for many years. That's pretty good, but it is, it's almost spooky how good they are at understanding meaning and parsing it out.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, for sure. It's been a wild ride this last year, just seeing the progress of everything. So Bryce, tell us about this tool now that you are working on, and that is kind of, that you're really putting a lot of time into.
Yeah, so the tool I'm working on right now is called Pendien. So 2 years ago, I got back from serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ in Guatemala. And in Guatemala, I spoke this language called Quechua. It's an indigenous Mayan language there. And it was written in the 80s or sometime around there, and then it's changed writing styles several times. So the language structure for this language is not consistent enough to have a large enough database to have anything like Google Translate, very many books translated, things like that. And so I was investigating doing just like a little side project, building like a machine translator to this language, and realized that we had a big data problem, actually. Like the amount of data we needed didn't exist in the world. So that's where this tool kind of comes in, and I'm using AI a lot for a couple different parts of it, of trying to build a corpus of data large enough to actually build these tools, and they could be potentially life-changing to the people that live there. Access to more books, reading resources, access to translators, things like that.
So what would you say like the overall goal? Like what is the end? Like what's the mission of Pendien?
Yeah, the mission is to bridge the gap between especially indigenous communities and the world of information. I want for people to be able to, in their own language, have access to every book, every website, every possible source of information, including language models like AI, like ChatGPT, so that they can use that in their work.
That's
and
amazing.
What have you found, I guess, as you've worked on this, what does your tool do currently? that's kind of a broad question. I realize. Maybe a better way to phrase it is like, what parts of the problem are you solving right now?
So right now, we're focusing on specific words. We're trying to build out basically every different language form of every word in the language. So we do that right now. You look at a noun, and there are different ways that you can conjugate nouns in Kekchi. So you put a letter at the beginning, basically, and it makes it possessive. So if I say my dog, it's inzi. If I say your dog, it's zi. Like things like that. So right now, we're just building out every different possible way to do that, every different verb conjugation, every different form. And then from there, we're able to combine our data set of 20,000 translations and expand those to 10 million.
Oh, dang. So the idea is like you're essentially kind of generating like a formal grammar for the language that doesn't exist currently, and then you're using that to generate more resources in the language.
Yeah, so pretty much. So there are grammar rules and written grammar rules. But if you look at all the language books, a lot of them are spelled differently. They have spaces in different spots, which makes it very difficult for a computer to be able to process it. Because, like, I don't know, we have the and we have them in English. And if there's a space in there, it can't recognize that they're the same word, you know? And they have completely different meanings. And so the difficulty lies in trying to normalize all of the resources that are in the language to one sort of spelling convention and spacing convention.
What was the language called, Bryce, that you spoke in Guatemala?
It's called Kekchi.
Kekchi. I'm like fascinated what we could get from them. You know what I mean? Like, what could we learn from them once they're able to then get their information out in an understandable way? Like, you think of all the different cultures, all the different languages that have kind of been inaccessible, like from both sides. I think this would be incredible. That's awesome.
I totally agree with you. Yeah. I mean, you think of, you know, how many geniuses are among their communities that just have no sort of way to gain access to more information and no source to output their information. So we could get some amazing literature, cultural like understanding, and just, I don't know, the implications are pretty big, I feel like, in the effect that it could have on the world.
Yeah, so I think like this is like a really important use of AI to talk about, because a lot of concerns I feel about AI center around this idea that like maybe we're losing, you know, our humanity, our humanness, whatever. But I think that a really overlooked quality of AI is exactly this, like the ability to create deeper connections between every one of us, and also like in cases like this where it's like a really tiny language. In a world without resources that cater to that language is going to slowly die off. Like that's just kind of, it's unfortunate, but that's generally how it goes with languages, right? Like they just, you know, for one reason or another, they slowly die off. And like this is an opportunity to revitalize those languages and revitalize those communities. Yeah, excuse me. Yeah,
I totally agree.
How large is your team right now, Bryce? Or is it
So
mostly
honestly,
you?
mostly just me for now. Yeah, I've got a developer who he said he was down to help me out as soon as I've got the data set and we're looking to validate it with like translators, like professional translators. So just me, but I mean, hopefully in the coming weeks it will start expanding.
Yeah. Do you anticipate
awesome,
this
though.
being almost like a non-profit? Or would this be like a for-profit idea?
So this is for profit. And the reason for that is we want it to be accessible to every major company. So once we collect this data set, we're going to pay obviously translators to validate it. But we want Google to build it into Google Translate and then translate all of their pages into Kekchi. We want Facebook to translate all the posts. We want Microsoft Azure to have this tool in all of their tools. We want OpenAI to train their models on this language. So we're trying to get it to everyone, and because it's a very niche market, it actually increases the value to some point for the data set itself.
So is there is the goal to develop and then sell kind of a product that can perform this this function for a lot of different niche languages or subcultures even, or is the goal to essentially generate these data sets in of itself and sell those as the product?
Yeah, so the data set is going to be the product, and really like the big goal for this is to find a lot of different underrepresented languages, work on documenting and creating data sets large enough that we can have these resources available to major companies, and then just really just expand this to as many people as we can, allow as many people as possible. And then I definitely see like nonprofit work in the future, working to translate libraries and, learning resources, things like that into other languages. But at least for now, we're focused more on the data set than anything else.
That makes sense.
Nice. That's awesome. So how do you balance this with your class load? How much time are you putting into this right now?
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've never had a time in my life where I'm like trying to get my homework done, and like my motivation is like, as soon as I finish my homework, I'm able to work on my project, So it's like homework is kind of my chore right now, and it gives me more motivation in school to just like knock it out. And then I'm able to work on this. And it's definitely like massive spurts of just like deep work, and then I take some time where I reach out to a couple people, ask questions about the language, reaching out to potential partners, applying for grants, things like that, and then I go back to really diving into the data. So
okay.
So aside from Kekchi, are there any other languages that you've kind of already identified as languages of interest?
That's a good question. Honestly, my focus has been like solely on Kekchi right now. And part of the reason for that is Kekchi is one of the few Mayan languages, and might be the only one, but don't quote me on that is actually increasing in the number of speakers.
Yeah.
So it's actually like a growing language, whereas a lot of these other languages are getting very infused with Spanish or like disappearing entirely. And it's more like your grandma speaks it, but nobody speaks it,
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I'm super excited to see where this goes and what we discover, what they discover from us and what we discover from them as we gain a better understanding. That'll be really very fascinating. If you were to say the biggest struggle right now in building these data sets, what would you say has been the hardest part?
So yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the big struggles that I've had is some of the nuances in the language structure itself. So let's say I have this sentence. It's called, I'll just say it. It's Lianina chop akar. So that would be directly translated to English, the one who catches your fish. But the actual translation would be your fisherman. And so that's where AI kind of steps in here, because for me to manually go through and do thousands and thousands of these corrections for examples like that, but also among a lot of different of the parts of the language, it's going to take a very long time. And I need to hire a lot of people and have a lot of like money to be able to pay these people. And it just makes it kind of impossible for someone like me to take on a project this big. And so the beautiful thing with AI and kind of how I'm overcoming this is you fine tune a GPT model and you have a for loop that just runs through, and it just looks for examples like this in the English translation and looks for ways to simplify it. How can we say this in the best way possible? And then with that, it's able to condense down a lot of these translations and make them in like the simplest form possible, so that we're getting actual interpretation rather than just direct translation.
An interesting point to bring up, like the difference between interpretation and translation. It's one that I had never thought about, but it does seem like very, very key point of difference. Because it's always fun going like for example, like a few years ago, I went to Brazil with my wife and her family because that's where her family is from. And it was always fun, like looking at like the English translations on their menus, and it would be like it would be like flank steak, but it would translate as like steak of the sun or something like that, right? Where clearly something was getting lost in translation.
Yeah.
That would be not lost with interpretation.
Oh,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, and there's a lot of things like that, you got to catch the nuances.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm curious. Have you had a chance to validate any of these translations yet with a actual translator or interpreter, or is it mostly been working off of your own knowledge of the language so far?
Yeah, so it's mostly been off my knowledge. I mean, 2 years ago, I was a translator to this language.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it definitely helps to not have to pay
Yeah.
people yet to go through and do it.
Yeah.
But I've got a couple friends that are also in the translation for this language. So it's nice to just be able to send people messages, just be like, hey, am I doing this right? And then look at translations that exist and base things off of that for now.
Yeah, that's great. And you can kind of build out the process for this language and then just use that to scale it, across all the many languages. That's great. So let's see. So AI you're using to catch those nuances. What AI models are you using mostly for this?
So mostly just ChatGPT. I've just done like fine-tuning models for that. Another use I've actually had for ChatGPT is they have like the thing where you can just train custom models. I've been using it for that, and then also just to give me like a baseline translation. So I started with 20,000 translation pairs, and I just trained a model on that and just said, this is my English sentence, this is my Kekchi sentence, and then tried to see how well it could do at translating. And it gave me actually like a lot of random stuff in there, but with correct words in certain spots. And so it just kind of like gave me the validation that, yes, this is going to work. We just need more data. So it's a cheap way to kind of validate the idea itself.
Yeah.
Where did you get the initial 20,000 translation sets? I'm curious.
So, yeah, I reached out to this professor that I know at BYU, and he connected me with one of his former students who, for his PhD dissertation, he tried to build a machine translator for this language. And so he had a pretty decent data set. So that was my first set of translations.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then, I mean, obviously I've had to build and expand since then, but that was the start.
That's awesome.
Nice. So Bryce, as we've talked to all these, various founders doing various things with AI, a lot of them say, just try it. Like just try AI. And that's kind of their big piece of advice, right? Which I think is totally true. I'm curious, what was like do you remember like the first time you used like ChatGPT, for example? Was there like a first use case that like you remember kind of, I don't know, a light bulb moment?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember the exact time that I used it for the first time, but I do remember when somebody told me about it for the first time, and I was like, what the heck? They were like, I just put in, like a couple ideas and asked it to write me an essay, and it wrote me an essay, and I was like, what is this? So like that next week, I was just like spamming it, seeing how I could like change my my prompts to get like the best outputs possible. And then just like kept going. And then now even in class, we have a class called software development using AI, where we're using AI all day to code. And it's like insane. It's kind of mind blowing, to see the potential.
So Utah State is adapting fast then. Already,
yeah, they are
already embracing it. That's exciting to hear. Because I think that it has a ton of value, especially in software development. Because if you know what code you want written, it can give you that code in seconds rather than, the minutes it would take you to type up, which is insane and so valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
Have there been any along the way? Has there been anything with AI that has kind of made you pause and think, like, giving you any sense of fear or nervousness?
Yeah, I definitely think that there is, and people that don't have a little bit of nervousness, I think maybe you should look at it again.
Yeah.
First off, from a business point of view, AI and the models that are being created right now are improving so much and so rapidly in their abilities that in order to have a business that's sustainable in the space of AI, you have to be able to use this in a new and different way.
Mm-hmm.
And a way that's not just going to be overtaken by GPT-5 or GPT-6, And so that has been like a big part of my fear going into the space of business using AI is, can I make my business in a way that's not just going to be able to be done in 2 seconds using an AI model in the future? And I think the key there is finding the most boring, monotonous task that you can and streamline the process using AI. And then from there, just like start to build on it.
I think that you're right about that. Like, there are so many multi-million, billion-dollar companies that at their core are really just extremely boring processes that have been optimized to hell and back.
They've just perfected it. They own that process. That could be like a book on that, I bet.
You probably could. You should let me know when you release it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Bryce, what are your concerns? Like, how are you planning to combat with Pendien, like Google all of a sudden just kind of doing their own, and that's that, you know what I mean? Like, do you have plans in place? Have you like thought much about that? Or is it more just like, let's just get this done and then worry about that?
Honestly, if they tried to do the same process right now, it would cost them a very large amount of money. Like translators, I think I was making like, obviously it was hard to get jobs, but when I got jobs as a translator, it equated to like something around $100 an hour. And so if you're paying translators $100 an hour to validate data sets and then try to build like a translation, like something to this scale, you're going to be spending, $10 million plus for a data set like this. And so, and at the same time, if they're trying to scrape, like do web scraping and use that, then they're going to run into the issues with like the spacing and different issues that I've run into, like, and that's kind of like the key of where I'm trying to fit in. So instead of trying to like combat against their process, I think more it's trying to support them in their goals to reach more people in the world. Like they released a statement that they want to have all of their resources accessible in the 1,000 most spoken languages in the world. And I want to support them in that mission by allowing them easier access to indigenous data sets.
I want to set yourself up as like one of the support legs of their whole product process, essentially.
Exactly.
That's smart. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of value in positioning yourself that way. Sorry, Jake, what were you saying?
Oh, I was going to pivot us a different way, so you go for it.
Okay, let's go for it.
I was just going to ask Bryce, because I think this is unique that you are a student right now, and I've been very curious because you've been a student since like before and after like ChatGPT, right? Like this crazy release. What would you say the biggest change you've seen happen with education, with college?
It's been funny. It's been definitely professor by professor how they're trying to either adapt to this or push against it. Like we have certain classes still where we're not allowed to even use it as a tool. And we have certain classes where they encourage use of that and they just want to see the prompts that you're using. And so it's this weird dynamic, kind of like we have the people that are trying to resist, and then we have the people that are trying to accept it and implement it as fast as possible. I think definitely my professors that have implemented this and found ways to streamline processes, and instead of trying to resist, they're trying to use it as a tool. I've seen just big changes in the way that we're learning. All of a sudden we're able to take on bigger projects, we're able to do things faster, and we have questions that are less about like specifics in process or syntax or things like that, and they're more like a high level, like, is this possible? How would I do this? And then we get better at explaining our ideas, and then it helps us write it. So
that's awesome.
That's fascinating.
Kind of a follow-on question from that, just a little one. Do you have any gauge on how many students are using like a base GPT 3.5 versus a GPT 4?
So for one of my classes, instead of getting a textbook this year, we had to buy a GPT 4 subscription.
That's sweet.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's been great. Yeah. So percentage-wise, I'm not sure, but definitely all the students I'm around, we all have GPT-4, and we're just like,
that's amazing.
Got like 3 windows open. We're just running things in every different window at once. But
yeah, the thing that I love about writing code with GPT-4 is like I can tell it to start generating some sort of code, and then in the meantime, I go back to like the code that I was troubleshooting, or the design that I was working on, or whatever, right? And like it's so nice to just be able to like, oh, like I need to write this function. Here, you robot, like take care of that for me while I work on things that I care about more.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
I love that forward-facing view, though. I mean, like one textbook versus GPT-4, it's like, how much more expanding is that? You know what I mean? Like, if everyone would just get on board,
cheaper.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Tell your professor he's killing it, or she's killing it, whoever they are.
They have an endorsement from the folks over at the AI Revolution podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll let them know. Give them like a handwritten letter or something that they're approved.
Yeah, there you go. We'll sign it. So Bryce, what would you say, coming up, seeing this, using it so much, and having this unique perspective as a student, what would you say to those maybe like other students, entrepreneurs, those who are they haven't used AI much, but they want to? Like, what advice would you give them?
I think first off, AI allows us to change the way that we approach problems. For example, like when we're growing up, when we're little kids, we ask questions about everything. What is this? What is this? And the educational system kind of beats that out of us a little bit, to the point where we're graduating high school and we're only asking like 2 questions a day. And AI just changes entirely how we look at things. It allows us to ask more questions, be more curious, kind of see the potential in our ideas and in the world in a different light. And so I think for the people that haven't started using it yet, and the entrepreneurs or, coders even that are a little bit hesitant to start using this, I think you just got to jump in. You got to start going, because the faster that you learn to ask the right questions, to explain yourself clearly, give instructions clearly, all of a sudden you're much more productive, and it opens your eyes to a lot of different things that maybe you hadn't recognized before. And to give you a quick example of this, the whole reason why this project, is because of AI. And I lost a hackathon at Utah State, and I had built like this NLP model, and it was like connected to Twilio, so it'd send out messages, and it was like adaptive questions. So, check for sentiment in the first one, and then it would check for, what you wanted to change in the second one. And then I had like NLP model to like graph it, all this stuff. And I was like stoked about this. I was like, this is so cool. I put in so much work. And lost to a group that had done, like basically you put in your dietary restrictions and what you want to eat, and then it uses GPT to generate like your grocery list and like meal plan. And I was like, guys, like it's cool, but like I put in so much work to this. And so that night I was sitting at my computer and I was like, okay, I just lost this thing. And I was like, help me come up with a cooler idea to like, that's more flashy than what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
And ask me about my skills and ask follow-up questions to like really dive into like where my skill set is. So I went through like 20 questions. GPT just kept asking me questions about like what I was interested in, what I was good at. All of a sudden it was like, it's like, you're interested in coding, you're interested in this language Kek-Chi, and like very few people have the intersection of data, coding, and this language. And they're like, you should look at trying to build like something
Wow.
using this language. And I was like, okay, what things could I do? You know? And then it gave me ideas like, oh, like start by trying to just like get access to a data set if you can. And so I reached out to some people, and then it's like, all right, try to build a translator. And then I was like, how do I build a translator? I've never worked with neural networks before. And then it's like, oh, I would suggest doing MBERT 50 or
Gosh.
whatever,
Yeah.
and then fine tuning it on this thing. And I was like, oh, how do I do that? And then it just walks me through just so much stuff, you know? And so
That's
the
amazing.
whole, like, the reason why this is a thing is because I just asked it to ask me follow-up questions and find what I like. Like, I don't know, it's just so crazy to me, like, how much it changed, like, really fast, you know?
I was gonna say it's one of those. This is one of those stories that I hear like we are living in the damn future. Like
Yeah,
like a conversation with
seriously.
your computer leads to you like altering your life path.
Yeah. And it coaches
In a
you
good
through.
way. Like you know like yeah like it didn't like you know tell you to go I don't know become like a druggie in Southern California, right? Like it didn't ruin your life. It's like, hey, like here's a good idea, like legitimately good idea for you to go pursue.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Right.
crazy.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I
no,
love that
totally.
story.
And this has always been something I've wanted to like work in and, you know, make happen. And I don't know. When I was there, it was so sad to see so many kids because a lot of their education was in Spanish because there
Yeah.
were more resources available in Spanish. But they would learn how to read in Spanish, some of these kids, and they could read fluently in Spanish and they had no clue what it was saying because they spoke Kek-Chi all day. And that's how they understood the world. And I was like, what is like, there's something wrong here. Like, I feel like,
Yeah.
obviously once they got to the higher levels, they could understand Spanish, but like some of these kids, like, and they're reading to their mom doesn't understand Spanish. I'm like, we need a way to do this, but at a much higher level, at a much more scalable level to change the world this way.
Yeah. Well, thanks for doing it, Bryce. Thanks for working to change the world of, you know, all these people and us, you know. So thank you. And we are big fans, and we want to see where it goes. For our listeners, if they want to support, if they want to follow you, you know, Pendien, what would be good platforms? Do you have social media handles? What would be good for our listeners?
Yeah, that's great. I really do not have any social medias besides LinkedIn and Facebook. So if you find me on LinkedIn, Bryce Judy, definitely add me there. Facebook should be the same, just at Bryce Judy. So
awesome.
Yeah, love to connect with anyone interested in this, anyone that has any more, you know, ideas. I'm definitely not the smartest person ever. And I love different people's ideas and different ways to do things if someone knows ways to streamline things. So I'm always open to talking and learning from others. So
and that makes you a lot smarter than a lot of people out there.
Yeah, that alone is a huge leg up. Well, thanks, Bryce. Before I end the recording, Spencer, Bryce, anything else you wanted to touch on, ask, talk about?
I just wanted to say that like I think this is a super cool project, and I'm really impressed with the vision for it. And I think that you've hit on a lot of kind of like core insights, both with business and with AI. So I'm really excited to see where you go with this, and with any future ventures you pursue as well. Yeah, no, super interested.
Seconded. I'm excited to see where it goes. All right, here.
Well, thank you guys.